Hi, this is me. I moved to Asheville, North Carolina in January of 2019 after being displaced from my home in Wilmington after Hurricane Florence. When I visited Asheville in the past, it was known as an open and welcoming community for artists, and since I'm an artist, this was always an area I wanted to move to. I also enjoy hiking in my free time. So after the hurricane uprooted me, I was looking forward to starting over in a new city and making connections to further my career. Since Riverstone Apartments was brand new, I was excited to move there. Paying $1,255 a month for a 2-bedroom apartment was more than I would normally spend, but since it was brand new, I went for it. After reading the lease, however, I expressed my concern with the office manager, Keena, because they allowed smoking inside of the apartments. I had never heard of this before, and since I'm allergic to cigarette smoke, I explained this was a problem. She was able to designate a few of the brand new buildings as smoke-free, so I eagerly moved forward and signed the lease. My leasing agent, Chelsea, assured me that construction was totally complete in my brand new smoke-free building, except for some appliances needing to be installed in the other apartments. When I moved in, however, I discovered that that wasn't true. In my apartment, the carpeting was lumpy, and they had to call the carpet installers back to rip up the carpet. The railing on my balcony was cracked, and they had to get the railing installers back to fix it. My brand new bathtub had a huge gash in it, and they had to call yet another team in to fill in the crack. My microwave was installed incorrectly, and every time I used it, sawdust leaked into my food. They eventually traded it out for the one in the apartment next door, leaving the broken one for whoever would be moving in there in the future. The lights in my living room and bathroom constantly flickered on and off all day long like strobe lights in a disco, and this went on for months. A few weeks after I moved in, construction continued on all the apartments in my building. Even though Chelsea said that construction was complete, it wasn't. Every morning at 7 a.m., I was woken up with drilling, hammering, and doors constantly slamming from all the apartments in my building. Every time a door slammed, it shook my apartment all day long, and this went on for months. But since I had already signed the lease, paid my rent, and moved in, I was stuck, and they knew that. When I asked the construction supervisor, Jonathan, when construction on my building would be complete, he said it was almost done, but it went on for another 2 months. When I asked about a small sealed door in my entryway, Jonathan explained it was the entry to the hot water heater, but that he wasn't happy with the placement of it, and his plan was to seal in the door with caulk to make it less of an eyesore. Since Keena, the office manager, had to visit my apartment repeatedly because of all these construction oversights, in an attempt to cover herself, she said the office managers were so busy prior to my move-in that they simply didn't get an opportunity to do a proper walkthrough of the apartments in my building. Fast forward to several months after I moved in. One day, I opened my coat closet, moved my shoes around, and saw a ring of mold around the bottom of the closet. A new maintenance guy, Isaiah, came to my apartment to clean the mold. He opened the walls and told me the hot water heater had leaked because of a bad installation job, which caused the mold to form in my closet. The construction supervisor, Jonathan, the same person who sealed in the door to the hot water heater, now came back to fix the plumbing problem. The entire time in my apartment, though, he never acknowledged the construction team's mistake. He never explained anything. In fact, he never even said a word to me. This is the same person who was supervising the entire construction of the multi-building apartment complex with more than 10 buildings, yet the entire time in my apartment, he never said a word to me. In fact, the only person who communicated with me was Isaiah, a new maintenance person at the time, who admitted that he never performed mold cleanup before, but that he watched it being done previously by some professionals one time. The management never even considered hiring a professional mold remediation crew. After cleaning up the mold, Isaiah opened the walls, and no protection was used on any of my furniture, or the carpeting, or any of my belongings. He used fans to blow the remaining mold spores, drywall, glassy insulation fiber, and dust all around my entire apartment. All these toxins were being blown around onto every surface in my apartment, onto my furniture, kitchen surfaces, my living room, and it spread to my bathrooms and bedrooms. All this pink glassy fiber insulation and drywall dust got onto my bedding, my clothes. It got everywhere. They already knew I was allergic to cigarette smoke, but didn't care about further toxins blowing around my entire apartment. I immediately got sick with migraines. I had trouble breathing. I had coughing attacks. My eyes were burning, and I had no energy. I explained all this to Kina, the office manager. She showed little concern and told me to just turn the fans down whenever it became overwhelming. The next day, Kina wasn't there and I was feeling even worse. I had diarrhea and I almost had to call an ambulance because of how lethargic and tired I was. I could barely get out of bed. I spoke to Hannah, an office assistant, and I asked if she could get accommodations for me to stay in a hotel because I was just too sick. She called Kina at home, and minutes later she came back and said I should have dealt with this issue yesterday when there was a manager on duty and that she couldn't help me. She suggested I hang out in the clubhouse and laid out on the couch like one of the dogs that visits there. When I asked if I could use one of their vacant apartments while they finished the cleanup, she said that was against their policy and that helping me any further wasn't in her job description. I kept asking what could be done for me, and she kept explaining that the cleanup wasn't that bad and that maintenance was doing a great job. I asked if she would just come back to my apartment and see how bad it was, but in a condescending tone, she asked if that would make me feel better. Eventually, Grace, the part-time office assistant, in an attempt to dismiss me, chimed in that their job titles were leasing agents, not managers, and helping me wasn't their responsibility. Since I was too sick to stay in the apartment, I spent money out of pocket to stay at a hotel for the next 3 nights while they continued blowing the fans in my apartment and finishing the messy cleanup. Days later, when I visited the office again and asked Kina for compensation and reimbursement for all these inconveniences and for the money that I had to spend out of pocket, at first she understood my frustration, and she said she would speak to her supervisor Molly, the regional manager at Tribute Properties. Kina's attitude quickly changed when I followed up with her. She then laughed at my reimbursement request and turned around and said the whole incident was now my fault and I should have caught their mistake sooner. How could I catch their mistake sooner when I personally watched the construction supervisor Jonathan seal in the door to the hot water heater, rendering it inaccessible to me? Kina kept saying this was all my responsibility. Meanwhile, she also said the managers were so busy they didn't have time to thoroughly inspect my apartment before I moved in. She was now trying every way possible to avoid responsibility and blame me. I spoke to her boss Molly at Tribute Properties, and her response was that there would inevitably be bumps in the road with apartment living, and they wouldn't be reimbursing me for anything because that would be a breach of contract. After they finished the messy cleanup in my apartment, I remained sick. I had to go to the doctors repeatedly. Every day I continued to smell rancid mold and other sour smells wafting in and out of my apartment. Every day. I was prescribed an inhaler. I was prescribed medication. I was still sick. After a few weeks, I noticed this pink glassy fiber insulation was now stuck to the moisture fans in my 2 bathrooms. It had traveled through my living room, through my bedrooms, and into my 2 bathrooms, and I was breathing it in more than a month later. I don't suffer from asthma, but every day I had to use an inhaler just to get relief from constant coughing. After they cleaned the moisture fans in my bathrooms, I was still sick. More than a month after they cleaned the mold from my apartment, I heard and felt constant drilling and hammering in the apartment beneath mine, and I learned that the mold from my apartment had been slowly leaking downstairs into the empty apartment beneath mine. They were continuing to clean up this messy mold, and the toxins were recirculating upstairs into my apartment, continuing to keep me sick. Maintenance never told me what was going on, of course. So when I raised concern in an email to Molly, the regional manager, about their continued messy cleanup, she completely ignored my email. Since she ignored my email, and maintenance obviously didn't know what they were doing or didn't care that they were still making me sick, I addressed my concerns with the local fire department. After learning that I contacted the local fire department, the regional manager Molly finally did respond to my email. She continued to ignore my health concerns, but this time she said maintenance knew exactly what they were doing and that she wouldn't be emailing me anymore because her focus was on hurricane relief in another city rather than on my health and well-being. Then she threatened me, threw some legalities at me, terminated my lease, and said she'd be doing me a favor by giving me 3 weeks to move out. I had to pack up my 2-bedroom apartment, hunt for a new place to live, and move, all in 3 weeks, while I was still very sick. Before sharing my reviews about my experiences online, I spoke with several of my neighbors in various buildings, and I learned that other residents had sewage overflowing from their toilets, and even more residents had mold under their toilets and bathtubs, where construction was also done poorly. When I eventually did review this apartment complex on Facebook, Google, Yelp, and YouTube, one of the staff members confronted me online under the fake name Scott Pearson, saying I shouldn't be leaving reviews all across the internet about their apartment complex. He said this wasn't a good way to get reimbursed for the damage that they caused me. No one working for Riverstone Apartments was actually named Scott Pearson, but I knew it was a staff member using a fake account after he posted all these personal things about me online, things that only the managers knew about me. Only one manager was in charge of social media and online marketing, and only one manager would have been given clearance to be on local housing groups on Facebook all day while at work. Only one staff member also lived in the apartment complex and bragged about how much he loved living there, and that if I didn't like it, I should have never moved in from the beginning. Then, moments after he harassed me, he went on to leave a fake 5-star review for the apartment complex on Google. The worst part of all this was I still had to interact with all the staff after they were all so incredibly rude to me. And when they saw me in passing, they just carried on completely unbothered, as if this was just business as usual. Months later, when I posted an updated review online warning others that the staff was now harassing me online, the same character, Scott Pearson, contacted me again with even more harassing messages and was even more emboldened this time. I posted reviews online because I only wish someone would have warned me before I moved in. I posted about this ordeal in local online groups, and literally the next day, their staff commented on my posts, contested everything I had to say, and went and left 5-star reviews on Yelp from fake accounts. This happened on 2 separate occasions by 2 separate staff members. Literally, days after leaving a review, they went and left 5-star reviews. Another staff member under a different fake account commented that my experience was unlike so many others, and how much better other residents were treated than me, and that living there was such a dream for her. Besides being very sick for months, my health has never fully recovered. Even though I moved, and it's more than a year and a half later, I still get coughing attacks to the point that I choke on my own spit. This incident caused me to lose months of income, and my finances have never fully recovered. I still have unpaid medical bills and other debt from this incident. They not only negatively affected my health and finances, but they also affected my quality and enjoyment of life. I moved to Asheville in hopes of broadening my career and my professional connections, and none of that has happened because of what happened to me. This entire ordeal has caused me PTSD, has affected my personal life and my career goals. To this day, I'm still getting bullied by people who work for this company online under fake account names. People I know have said that continuing to speak up about a company who has continually threatened and harassed me could cost me my life. But I'm speaking out again because I'm done living in fear of continued retaliation by these people. Staying silent won't stop them from doing the same thing to future residents that look like me under the protection of their lease. North Carolina is a landlord state, and landlords have more rights and protection here than in most states. They know this, and that's why companies like Tribute Properties continue to build shoddy construction, mistreat residents, and blame those same residents for their mistakes, and yet they continue to get away with it. From my first complaint, Molly, the regional manager, stated how the lease was vetted by the North Carolina Lawyers Association and that they weren't responsible for any harm they did to me. It wouldn't have cost them much to take preventative measures and put me in a hotel while they performed this messy cleanup. Or better yet, to hire a professional mold cleanup crew who knew what they were doing. Or at the very least, to let me stay in one of their many vacant apartments. But they purposely chose not to help me because my life never mattered to them, and they don't care about residents who look like me. The same way that it's not okay for a president to incite a mob of entitled white men to lay siege to the Capitol with little to no resistance from law enforcement, it's not okay for a corporate regional manager to incite cyberbullying of a resident just because this company hasn't faced repercussions. Racism isn't just police brutality and being called racial slurs. I know I wouldn't have been treated like trash by all of the staff members if I wasn't a woman and if I wasn't black. Racism is why you have 4 different managers feel comfortable enough disrespecting me to my face and then following up and doing it online from fake accounts. They don't think there's any consequences for their actions. I'm originally from New York City, and I knew moving to the South meant facing some racism, but I never expected it to be this extreme. Before living here, I lived in Charleston, South Carolina, and Wilmington, North Carolina, 2 very racist cities, and I was treated better in the 3 years I lived there than I was by the staff at this company. Tribute Properties is based in Wilmington, and it breaks my heart that they would bring the same racist company culture here to Asheville. It breaks my heart the way the staff treated me, and that's why I have continued to speak up about this issue. No one else should have to go through what I went through at the hands of the people who work for this company, whether they look like me or not.